Hey guys, welcome back. So today I have another book review for you, and this time the book is called American Predator: The Hunt for the Most Meticulous Serial Killer of the 21st Century. It's by Maureen Callahan. It is 4.8 stars on Goodreads, and I'm going to give it 3 stars as you can see over here. But this was an interesting read. I think the title is slightly misleading. So it is about a man named Israel Keys, and Callahan tells us in the introduction that you have probably never heard of him. I listened to a podcast about Israel Keys, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think he is horrifying. He's so creepy. What he did was creepy. He actually scares me. So I was kind of a chicken starting to read this, but I did it anyway. But yeah, I think this title is a little bit misleading because when they find Keys, they don't know that he's a serial killer. They think that he is a kidnapper, but that's kind of neither here nor there. They find out over time that yes, he was a serial killer. And like I said, I think he's really creepy, but this story doesn't really focus on Keys himself. We do find out a little bit about him and what he did, but the focus of the story is on the law enforcement that was hunting Keys. So we're talking about the Anchorage Police Department from Anchorage, Alaska, which is where he lived, the FBI that was headquartered in Anchorage, the Texas Rangers in Texas, the FBI in Texas, and then they had other police departments and everything looking for him throughout. And this story starts out with the kidnapping case that is going to kind of bring Keys down, and it follows the whole time where they're trying to find him. He's found in Texas, which sounds kind of random, but yeah, he's found in Texas and eventually extradited back to Alaska, and the FBI ends up handling the majority of his case, though he is housed in just a jail in Anchorage. And this highlights kind of a lot of the struggles that police departments go through working together, even though it worked out pretty well for them here. And then kind of what happens when the FBI is fighting with federal prosecutors, and what happens when you have someone in custody that is probably smarter than all of you combined. That's one of the main things about this is Israel Keys was very, very intelligent, even though he got caught in kind of a silly way. I'm not going to give that away. You can definitely look it up if you're interested. I would suggest reading about Israel Keys or listening to a podcast or something. I listened to a Crime Junkie podcast about him, so I kind of knew this story going in. But if you don't and you just go in blind, it might be a little bit confusing and you're really not going to know exactly what's going on. But yeah, and it kind of highlights issues that police have when they go into something without looking at it as a crime. They thought that this girl had run away, so it wasn't treated like a kidnapping for a very long time. And then you have like the police in Anchorage that were watching Keys while he was going to trial and everything that just didn't care. They didn't really seem to do their jobs. And throughout the book, it says like that's quite normal in Alaska and all kinds of things like that. I personally don't know, but like I said, the FBI ends up working on this because kidnapping cases, I'm going to assume, I did not look this up, but I think kidnapping cases must be federal because the FBI is the one that ended up dealing with it. And then it, ended up being a federal case. Not to really give anything away, but Keys ends up dying in the end. So you don't really get a lot of justice there. Like I said, this is a really interesting book, but I will say it's a little bit creepy and there's, some kind of dark things in it. I would definitely suggest it for a little bit older audiences. And if you're easily scared about things, I wasn't personally afraid while I was reading this book, but I woke up at about 2 a.m. and was thinking of all the ways that my house could be broken into. So, like, if that's you, maybe take that with a grain of salt because, like I said, I was a little bit nervous at about 2 a.m. But I will say this book reads slightly like a police procedural television show or something would. So you get a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, a lot of what the police were doing, and not a lot about the actual person that they're hunting. So if you're into shows like Bones or CSI or NCIS or whatever, you'll probably enjoy this. It's actually a really easy read. The chapters are pretty short. You're not just like slogging through like 50-page chapters about whatever. And it does have a lot of interviews in it, so you get a lot of things in Key's own words. And Callahan says that in researching this book, she interviewed all of these police officers and FBI agents and Texas Rangers and everything else. So she says, like, they thought, or he was thinking, and she said that comes specifically from what they had said about the time that they were doing all of this. So you do get a lot of firsthand accounts, but at the same time, I'm sure they're not able to tell you everything when you interview people like this. So there is a lot that we still don't know. They do say there's a lot that the FBI still hasn't released about this case, even though it was in 2012 that all of this was happening. So it's been 8 years now, and again, a lot of people aren't even going to know about this guy. So that's like, that's really interesting to me, like that some people like Ted Bundy or whatever get a lot of recognition really quickly and everyone knows their story. But then you have this guy who it could be connected to as many as 11, they think, homicides or disappearances across the country. And we still don't really know that much about him. Like I said, Keyes is a creepy guy. You can look at pictures of him and he looks a bit creepy there. But if you read about what he did, he was kind of horrible, like absolutely horrifying, honestly. He had like murder kits that were buried in different places, and he like idolized Ted Bundy, and there was just a lot going on. It's really a kind of a dark story, honestly, but this book isn't really that dark. We don't really get a lot of really dark details, which is good because some images you just don't want to have in your head. But like I said, it's an interesting read. I, for some reason, expected it to be more about Keyes himself than the hunt for him, which looking back, that was my mistake because it's literally in the title. So I was a little bit unsure, but I did enjoy reading it. It's always interesting to see how things are going on behind the scenes. And in this case, how much of a mess everything was behind the scenes. But yeah, like I said, if you're interested in kind of police procedural type things, if you're interested in knowing how different police departments work together, or really if you're interested in serial killers or anything like that, I would give it a read. It won a lot of awards. It was like one of the best books to read, one of the best true crime books. There's a whole long list if you look it up. It'll tell you everything that it was like nominated for, or all the lists that it was on. It was a New York Times bestseller. So it really is interesting. It really isn't a bad book. And you've probably noticed that I say that about every book when I'm like, it's not a bad book. And I always rate them 3 or 4 stars. I haven't had a 5-star yet. That is because if it is below 3 stars, I probably will not finish it. If I'm not interested, I won't finish it. I'll just start reading something else. So I will probably never have a book less than that unless I absolutely hate it and just want to rant about it. So keep that in mind. Clearly, I don't think that they're bad because I finished them. But that's all I have for you about this book today. But I will be back next week with something new. Bye.